Hello and welcome back. We're building a people and culture management system in this series, and this series is brought to you by Prairie HR Solutions. My name is Jake Finger, Principal Consultant here at Prairie HR Solutions. And in this video, I'd like to carry on with what we did in our last video. Our last video, we created 4 new drop downs. These are going to be filters, just like the division and the job title. And what we did in the last video was we took data from our Google Sheet and used that data to populate these drop downs here. And the other thing that we did was we consolidated a lot of our drop down functions. We had a function for each one of these, so we consolidated them, passed it down to as an array, and then we did the same exact thing here when we populated it. Now, the challenge with this is we are running multiple for eaches every time. So that's going to take a hit on our performance. So let's go back and actually see how that is impacting our performance. Now, before, once it got done loading, it would, or the spinner got done, everything would be populated. You'll see here, however, it takes a second. If you're following along, you'll notice that the spinner finishes before this is uploaded. Now, 3 seconds, I prefer 3 seconds as the absolute time that I am trying to keep my code from running. You know, if it can happen in less than 3 seconds, I'm okay with it. Ideally, it'd be a second, but it is what it is. So also in this video, we are going to tackle this performance issue, but the primary purpose of this video is to create the functionality for these. Now we have this built in going to the same exact function as the division and the job title, but it doesn't do anything. So this is the purpose of this video, is to get that to happen. So let's come back over here to our code, and where we're going to need to add this is in this comp filter. So all of our drop down boxes essentially fire this get comp filter and then passes an event argument, and then we can get the ID from that. So what we need to do is simply add on some pieces here. So we need to copy this if else. So we're going to copy a lot of this, and then simply something weird's here. Something happened to our if else. So we have our comp division. I wonder if I deleted it by accident somehow. Okay, yep, there it is. Okay, so we got our comp job. So what we're going to do, had me worried there for a second. What we're going to do is we're going to copy this and then add another one here. And instead of our comp filter select, we are going to need to grab this functional family piece right here. So if this equals the comp functional family, then what we need to do is run this little bit of code here. Now, we need to get the value. If we're going to filter it, we need to get the value of whatever this is. So instead of comp jobs, we want to get the value of that field. And let's just call this comp FF. Or we could just use that. There we go. That'll work. And we'll leave the rest here. This is fine. We'll have to add more onto it because essentially what this is doing is this is resetting and clearing. So we'll have to add those other drop-down boxes on here. But for now, this is fine. This doesn't do comp jobs, and comp jobs doesn't have a default of all families, or has all families, not all jobs. So we need to make sure that it reads that. Okay, so this is going to be all families. And now what we're going to need to do is look at what code we're running. So this is sending it over to comp jobs. And we don't want to send it over to comp jobs. We want to send it to something else. So let's just send this over to comp FF. And it's not going to take this comp jobs. It's going to take this comp family, comp functional family, which is the value of what's in here. So now we need to just go create this. So let's grab this and come back over here to our analytics. And as you see, we can build on, we can add functionality by utilizing what's already here. So once you have a baseline, you can add more and more to it. The key thing to remember is the more you add to it, the slower the potential of performance slowdown increases dramatically, as we can just see. But there's a way around that as well. You can always refine your code once it gets to a certain point and start removing redundancies, and it'll speed it up quite a bit. So let's come down here to, this is our div filter, jobs filter. So let's create our functional family filter right here. And now what we're going to do is we essentially just need to do the same exact thing that our comp jobs filter and comp div filter is doing. Now, we are repeating ourselves, and we operate under a premise of what's called dry, don't repeat yourself. To get it functional, we'll do it this way, and then we'll take a second to look at how we can consolidate all this, because these functions are a repeat of each other, and we don't want that. So let's just grab all this, and let's add this in here. So it's not going to be, this isn't going to be the job values. This is going to be this. When you copy and paste, it's best to just go line by line. And we don't want comp jobs. Let's just call this comp FF for now. Comp FF. And employee full data is fine. We're going to filter it. We're going to filter each row by the value in this, if it's equal to that. So we need to find out where our functional family is in our sheet. Now, ideally, and it will be this way, but where the functional family and all that should go should be right here in this job title, job category. However, if we were to move this over, we would then have to adjust anything else that's utilizing these fields here. And I mean, we can do that definitely, but for now, that'll be either a later series or whatnot. But for now, I just took the functional family and job level and then randomly assigned them to each row at the very end. That way it's not really messing anything up yet. We will take this and move it over and then adjust it, but for now we're just gonna use this. So we need to find the index of this, because remember, this is that all employee, or this employee full data, which is coming to us as an array. An array is zero index, or index based, starting at 0. So we need to figure out whatever index this is. So we can just highlight that heading and go all the way back over here. As you can see, our employee database is growing, and this is nowhere near a full employee database, but we have, so this is at column 84. Zero based, that index should be 83. So now we can come back over here and simply put 83 here, and then everything else should be the same, because this is what we're using not only to populate the chart, but also all the data pieces in there. So let's save this, and then we'll do one last check. in our total rewards JS. Now, what's going to happen is it's going to send that, and then it's going to return that value or those values, which is the object, and then it's going to send it over to this process data. Now, this process data is then going to take that, and if you remember what that process data function did, it's this little thing right here. What that does is it takes whatever data is coming to it at whatever time, and then it updates this global variable. So this global variable essentially is constantly changing, and then it redraws that chart all over again. So this should be good. So let's come back over here to our sheet, or our dashboard rather, and refresh it and then see how this works. Little spinners going on. Okay, we have data. So now what should happen is when we select functional family and select something there, it should run its code to filter, and then all this should change based on whatever this functional family is selected. So let's do that. Let's do full stack development. Okay, so good. It changed. And that changed. And this information changed. Okay, good. So what you could do to check the data here is you could simply come down here and do what's called a console log on all data. And every time the data changes, it's going to fire off a console log. And then you can hit F12 to pull up that little box up here and check the console log and then review the data to make sure that it's pulling what it's supposed to be pulling. So let's go over and find the very first one, which would make it easiest. So it's operations. So if we select operations, we should have this first row of data come up as our first object or array, excuse me. So let's save this, and then we'll come back over and refresh our screen. And I know you can't see the F12 box simply because it's off the screen. It's a higher Z index. But, so we got our initial 500 array according to our console log. And let's go ahead and change our functional family to full stack development. Nope, it wasn't full stack development, was it? It was operations. To operations, and then it'll populate that. Okay, it fetched some data, and the length was 33. So let's see, 33. Yep. And the first row of data is female holiday pay. Is that marketing? Asian, non-covered, confidential, and veteran honorable. Yep, so this is it. So our data is pulling correctly. So now what we can actually do is essentially use this same type of logic to finish writing the rest of this code. Now I'm not going to have you watch what I'm doing here. Just because it's the same exact thing that we just did, just over and over and over again. What I would like to do is show you how we can consolidate things differently to assist not only with the scalability or adding or removing something, but also the performance as well. So let's go back to our those drop-down boxes. And those drop-down boxes, I believe, are up here. Yep, there we go. So all of this, what we would like to do is just take this and simply just not have it run a for each over and over and over again. We want it just to run for each once. And in order to do that, we have to take all this data 0, data 1, and all these things, and then essentially then run the for each based on that. So what we can use essentially is a an object, so to speak. So and we've done this before. This should look familiar if you've watched the previous videos. So what I'm going to do is I am going to make a map of the IDs. And these are going to be the drop-down IDs to the data indexes, these. Okay, I'm going to spell this wrong, maybe. Okay, I don't know if that's spelled right. It looks right. But yeah. Okay, so in order to do this, we are going to need a variable of all of these objects. And remember, the object is going to be a value key pair, and the key is going to be essentially these IDs. So let's create that constant. Let's say constant, let's be incredibly original here and say drop down mapping. That'll work. And now this is going to be an object. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this comp division and set that to 0. And then we're going to do the same exact thing to the comp jobs. The comp family. Or the filter drop down, excuse me, this. Let's just get them all over there first. And remember, the key to this is to speed it up to where it's not being beat by the closing of that spinner. Because the whole point of the spinner is to keep people from touching stuff while it's loading. So that's what we're attempting to do here. So comp jobs is 1. And then this is 2, and so on. And the great thing is with this is in order to add something, you just simply come here and add it. And you don't have to do all of this. And this is going to be 6. Okay, good. So now we have an object. And now that we have an object, we don't need this anymore. Because what we did was we created an object based on this data. And this data now assigns this to 0. So now what we can do is we can loop through our array, or our object here, the mapping object. So I'll create a comment here. And then we want to populate this in each dropdown. So what we're going to need to do is construct essentially an object. So we're going to need to use this object constructor, and we are going to want to do the entries of this. So each entry of our drop-down mapping. And if you don't understand what I'm doing at the first take or right off the bat, you'll at least have the code to where once you start changing things in it and tailoring it to suit your needs, it should make more sense. So for every one of these, for every object entry here, the values there, we want to run a for each. So we can continue on with that instruction line. And this for each, we're going to need that. Yeah, we're going to need that. We are going to want the drop-down ID, which is what we had, and then the data index, this and this. So let's just call it that, drop-down ID, and then data index. And then we need to run a function on each one of these. And this function is essentially going to run a second for each. So it's going to be a for each within a for each, which still beats 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So in order to do that, we need to get whatever this ID is. And let's store that in a variable. And let's call that variable drop down, I guess. And this drop down is going to be equal to the document get element by ID. And we don't know what that ID is because it's being passed in our first for each piece. It's whatever this is. So we just need to grab that and pass it here. And then we'll close that out. Okay, so we're creating we're going through each object here. And for each one of these and these, we are essentially getting the drop-down ID and storing it in a variable here. So, okay, good. So this is also going to be constantly being updated every time this runs, which is fine. Which is kind of what we want. So now what we need to do is to first check if the drop down or the data exists. And the reason we're doing this is because we don't want our page to not be loaded when we run this. So let's create an if statement. And this is the same thing that we have been doing, ensuring that things are loaded before they are needed, so we don't get that error. So we need to check if our drop down and the data, which is being passed here at the data index, whatever it's on, exists. And if it exists, I mean, if there is something there, this is going to return true, and then we can run something. So let me create a comment for that. Check to see if drop down and data exists. If so, run the code. There we go. So now if it does exist, what we want it to do is to take this data at the data index, whatever that is, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever that is, and then we want to run our for each function here. So what we essentially did was replaced this with this, so it can loop through it. So let's just recreate that for each, and our for each is going to be, let's just leave it as category. No, it should be 2 this time. We'll use our arrow function, and then what we can do is essentially grab this and paste it in here, except it's not going to be the comp dropdown. This doesn't exist anymore. What exists is this dropdown, because that is the ID of where it is that we're going to place it. So this is now dynamic, and we can simply just pass whatever dropdown it is for that index. So that should take care of the for each. And then that should be the if statement. And then this should be the object entry. That's our constant drop. Yeah, okay, so now we can actually get rid of all of this because we just recreated it. So if we did this correctly, let's make sure all of our curly brackets, our curly braces here line up. So if we did this correctly, we just took that whole line and cut it down quite a bit simply by just taking everything and putting it in an object and then looping through that object as needed. So let's save this and see exactly how that worked. Better yet, let's see if it worked and we didn't make any mistakes anywhere, but it should speed up this code quite a bit. We're getting a spinner, so no syntaxes, and as soon as I hit it, it is available. Good. So there's no delay there. So now what we can do is kind of the same concept with our compensation filter, that employee full data, this thing over here, this piece. So what we can do is we can let's just use this get comp jobs filter. We'll just do that first. And let's comment this out for now, because we'll just recreate this and then carve what it is that we need. So let's create that function. This will be get comp. Let's just call it get comp filter. Yeah, we'll just call it get comp filter. That'll be fine. And we'll just have to figure out where this goes so we can rename it. Because what we're going to have to do is change this. We're not going to be able to call this anymore or this anymore. Okay, here we go. So what we're going to pass through here is we are going to pass essentially a filter index and a filter value. And the filter index is going to be whatever triggered the function. So we can use, if our filter index is going to be the division, this is the number that we want to pass through to it. And then for job filter, this is the number we want to pass through to it, and then 83 and so on. So the first one that's going to happen is we need to give this a name. Let's just call it filter index. And then the second argument is going to be the filter value. And then what we can do with this is we can actually get rid of that, and we can just focus on this essentially. So let's return employee full data, or imp full data. And this full data, we're going to want to first run a filter on. And since we're combining it, we need to map that filter data by this. So essentially, we're going to grab this after we run a filter, and we want our filter to be this, except we're not going to pass the row number, we're going to pass the row filter index. So we don't need that. Well, I guess we can leave it there, huh? Let's leave it there. And then after we run the filter, we then need to map it. So we're essentially going to do this same exact thing. Right here. Okay, and then all these here will be the same. And let's just make sure that we have everything closed. So now in order to get this thing done, so this actually, I'm glad I looked back up here. We're not using the jobs value anymore. We're using this filters value. So keep this in mind, we need the index as a number first, and then we need the filter value as whatever that filter value is. So let's come back over here to our JavaScript code, and let's look at our comp division first. So we're not calling our comp division filter anymore. What we're going to call is this. So let's just add it on at the end of that. And our filter index is going to be, what, 5, I believe? Let's see. Nope. For our division, it is going to be, yep, 5. So what we simply need to do is pass here is 5. And then the filter value is going to be the comp division. And then we can get rid of this. Don't need it anymore. Now what we can do is grab this and come down here to this piece. And this is not comp division. This is going to be comp jobs. This should be 18. And then okay, so that's the filter piece. So let's see. So in actuality, we don't need this either. That's 83. Okay, so oops, let's come back over here to our JS. And that looks like a lot. So I'm actually just going to add it here. This should be 83. And we are going to pass this as the value. Okay, good. So now what we should be able to do is let's just save this and then we'll go back and take a chainsaw to this stuff. We won't need this anymore. That's going away. We won't need this anymore, and we won't need this anymore. Okay, let's see if that works. So now nothing should actually change here. Functionality should still be the same. We just cleaned up our code. So drop-down boxes works. Let's see if it populates things. Okay, it should change it. And there we go. And everything else should still work. And then we'll do our job title, make sure that one works. And then our family. Good, awesome. So now in order to build the job level state and employee number, we need to just simply come in here, figure out where our employee column is in that data, and then also the filter value, and then we should have no problem getting this from here. So that's actually a lot easier way to do that. And it took away quite a bit of code to where we only have one code doing the same exact thing here. So good. I hope this was informative. We're successful in creating this. I'm going to go ahead and do this outside of the episode. I'll finish up the rest of them. And if you're following along, I suggest you do the same thing because you'll learn quite a bit by what's occurring here, simply by if you make a mistake, figuring out what's wrong with it, but also just doing it over and over will help you remember and retain that. If you do like what we're doing, please hit that subscribe button. And until next time, please take care.